Welcome to Beekeeping Today Podcast, presented by Bee Culture. Beekeeping Today Podcast is your source for beekeeping news, information, and entertainment. I'm Jeff Ott.
And I'm Kim Flatham.
Hey, Jeff and Kim. Today's sponsor is Global Patties. They're a family-operated business that manufactures protein supplement patties for honeybees. It's a good time to think about honeybee nutrition. Feeding your hive's protein supplement patties will ensure that they produce strong and healthy colonies by increasing brood production and overall honey flow. Now is a great time to consider what type of patty is right for your area and your honeybees. Global offers a variety of standard patties as well as custom patties to meet your needs. No matter where you are, Global is ready to serve you out of their manufacturing plants in Airdrie, Alberta, and in Butte, Montana, or from distribution depots across the continent. Visit them today at www.globalpatties.com.
Hey, thanks, Sherry, and thanks, Global Patties. And while I'm at it, thanks, everybody, for joining us today. You know, everyone, each week we get to talk about how much we appreciate our sponsor support. They help make all of this happen and provide us the ability to bring you each episode. With that, thanks to Bee Culture magazine for continuing their presenting sponsorship of this podcast. Bee Culture has been the magazine for American beekeeping since 1873. Subscribe to Bee Culture today. And while you're there, check out Bee Culture's Beekeeping Your First 3 Years, a quarterly magazine for beginning beekeepers. We also want to thank 2 Million Blossoms as sponsor of this episode. 2 Million Blossoms is a quarterly magazine dedicated to protecting all pollinators. Learn more on our Season 2, Episode 9 podcast with editor and our guest co-host, Kirsten Trainer, and from visiting www.2millionblossoms.com, and that is with a number 2. Hey, everybody, we have a fun interview all set for you this week. But first, Kim, how are you doing? How's that weather there in Ohio?
In a word, really, 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 really bad. How's that? I got a foot of snow on my driveway. I got stuck trying to get out this morning. I'm done. I'm done with winter. I'm really done with winter.
I can tell because that was 5 words and not 1. And well, have you heard from any of the beekeepers, in Texas?
In Texas? No, I haven't talked to anybody down there at all. And I'm guessing that they're, all things considered, they got it worse than I do.
Oh, definitely. And we'd be thinking of everybody in Texas and across the South who've been impacted by these storms. Hey, we got a big show lined up for everybody, so let's get going. I just wanted to make a couple quick announcements. The Western Apicultural Society has their mini conference coming up on February 24th. It's on the bee gut microbiome, which ought to be really interesting. And the comment period for the APHIS release of the beetle to combat the Chinese Tallow Tree is coming up on February 22nd, which is the scheduled release date for this podcast. So check on that and actually listen. We have a whole show coming up on the Chinese tallow issue with Stephen Coy. Hey, Kim, who is that across the virtual table from you?
Yeah. Jim's here today, Jim too. And we've been talking about Honey Bee Obscura, the podcast that he and I do, talking about, well, what's a couple of the past topics we've done, Jim?
Well, the one you brought it up, that midwinter inspection. We were childlike doing that. I mean, winter hadn't really even started then. So that was intriguing to go back and review that, which directly then, Kim, with me, led right into the good things about beekeeping. It's kind of a short list right now. I'm kidding.
Well, we got some good things coming up. I'll tell you that. I know I've been doing a little homework on requeening because I'm going to have to do some of that this spring. So we're going to be talking about requeening. And do you have any outyards, Jim? I don't think you do you?
No, I do. I do have an outyard. It's about 40 miles from me. I've talked about it in Bee Culture, some articles, how that yard does pretty good because I don't go there very often.
Isn't that the one where you moved the mean hive to, the mean colony?
That is exactly right, Jeff. You've got a great memory. That's my penal colony down there. So if you're a real bad colony, you get sent down to southern Ohio.
Go to your outyard.
Well, we've got a bunch of them coming up. I mentioned requeening and outyards and swarming. We're going to be talking about swarming, and I never have any trouble with swarming. Do you?
I don't want to talk about that, Kim. I think I know where you're going. To me, robbing is a kind of swarming.
In a way.
And I have some interesting stories about robbing, so I enjoy talking about that. I'll be looking forward to having that one air at some point here in the future.
Good. Well, these shows come out on Thursday. Isn't it Thursday morning, right, Jeff?
Yes, Thursdays.
Thursday morning at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and you can listen in and Jim and I if you want, or talk about all sorts of things. All things honeybee.
Yeah, technically they come out at 5:30 Eastern, but that's who's wanting to get technical that hour.
There's a 5:30 in the morning?
Yeah, there is. So you guys have been working together for quite a while, haven't you? You've known each other. You have a long history. It's not like we just threw you together, isn't it?
No, it's been a long time, Kim. I woke up one day and I was old.
Yeah.
But we've been working together, on bee culture, art projects for decades and decades.
I think you started working, writing for Bee Culture just before I did. That was back in the days when you your deadline was such to the point that if you put it in the mail, it'd be late, so you drove it up to Medina.
Yeah, I did that. That's true, and I could slide it through cracks in the door.
Yep.
And it was handwritten. None of those things survived.
Nope,
and
not one.
You're reminiscing. You're an old guy, Kim. You're really old.
Well, Jim, it's great to have you visit us here on Beekeeping Today Podcast, and I do enjoy the Honey Bee Obscura podcast.
Thank you.
And you guys were talking about the winter feeding, and I was out in the yard the other day, just yesterday, and I was glad you have that podcast up because I'm going to definitely need to do some feeding. As soon as it gets above 50 degrees, I got to get in them and feed them. Good job. Well, thanks a lot. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you.
Hey, Kim, reading anything new?
I just got a new book from Jeremy over at Northern Bee Books in the UK, and it's really pretty interesting. I'd like to tell you a little bit about it. The title's Honeybees, A Hive of Information, an annotated anthology by Graham Kingham. It's published, like I said, by Northern Bee Books, and if you go to their webpage, www.northernbeebooks.com, you can find it, and they'll send it to you for $22.99. Let me tell you what an annotated anthology is. What an anthology is a collection of articles, poems, stories, or the like, made by the author of the book, which is why they call it an anthology. It's a collection. Annotation is when the author supplements the content with photos, diagrams, drawings, notes, or charts to help explain the contents. And that's exactly what this book is. It has 143 pages. There's color throughout, color photos, diagrams, what have you, throughout. It's really interesting. The author explores just over 100 subjects in this book that are all surrounding the honeybee. There are some major headings like bits and pieces, honey, insect classification, seeing with ultraviolet light, a lot about bee plants, pollen ID and coefficients, all about lots of kinds of British wasps, viruses, honeybees, morphology, and lots more. Each of these is short, some less than a page. The longest is 3 or so pages, and there aren't very many that are even more than 1 page. Some are incredibly detailed. Honey, for instance, has 14 different questions answered, while others are single or maybe only double questions regarding the topic at hand. Wax moth, a single page. That's all it gets. Well, you can see over 100 topics squeezed onto 143 pages. Each is short, succinct, and explained well. It's not a dictionary, nor is it an encyclopedia. It is, as the title says, a hive of information. It's well annotated and well explained. It's really how can I say it? It's a joy to read. It's fun to read. It's one of those books that's good to have close at hand when you find something in a much denser book that you're reading and you don't quite understand. It'll probably be explained here. Short, sweet, and to the point. It does have a British flavor, but science being science, it isn't too influenced by the author's location. But it is just enough to be fun to read, along with explaining over 100 things bees. I think you should get it, Jeff. It's a good book to have by your elbow when you're reading those other dense books you read.
Hello, beekeepers. Your honeybees face a lot of challenges out there. Unbalanced food sources from monoculture crops, holding yards, drought, food shortages, antibiotics, pesticides, and pathogens like chalk brood. To overcome these challenges, your bees need the multiple bacteria that are in all nectars, pollens, and the environment. These bacteria aid honeybees' digestion and improve your honeybees' response and resilience to pesticides. Now you can help improve your honey colony health with a quick, easy, and safe-to-use product. Strong Microbial's Super DFM Honeybee uses naturally occurring bacteria to restore the healthy gut biome of your honeybees. Check them out today at www.strongmicrobials.com.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. We have with us right now Stephen Coy. He's an executive board member of the American Honey Producers, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about the Chinese tallow issue that's before everybody in across the southern tier of the United States. Welcome back to the show, Stephen.
Well, hey, Jeff. Thanks for having me back. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet.
Good seeing you again, Stephen. You may remember Stephen was with us a while back talking about Russian bees because he's one of the Russian bee breeders.
Yeah, that's fixing to get cranked up as soon as we get this little bit of cold weather out of South Mississippi.
How cold's it been down there? Are you anything like Texas?
We had 17 one night and 19 the second night.
Wow.
I did have to replace some water pipes.
Oh no.
That's miserable.
It was a pretty easy fix, all things considered.
Well, Steve, there's an issue coming up, and that's why we wanted to talk to you today. You're a member of the American Honey Producers on the executive board, and APHIS, the Animal Plant Inspection Service, USDA's group, has an idea that the Chinese tallow tree is an invasive plant and should be, if not eradicated, at least significantly controlled. And they've proposed importing a beetle and a moth to do that. And since you are an integral part of honey production in the part of the world that this tree lives in, how important is the tallow tree to your business and to your honey crop?
The tallow tree is probably 75% of my honey production every year. But more than that, it helps me have healthy bees so that I can raise queens and sell nukes. It's vital to my personal business, and it's vital to the commercial beekeepers in the state of Mississippi. I mean, as the president of the Mississippi Beekeepers Association, I'm working on behalf of all of our members. There's only about 17 commercial beekeepers in the state. We produce, according to NASS, 2 million pounds of honey. 60 to 70% of that honey every year is from tallow. So tallow is immensely important. It's beyond that. I mean, it's what we can't function like we currently do. This industry is not going to exist like it does today if tallow significantly is reduced, or heaven forbid if it goes away.
Just give folks a little bit of background. Chinese tallow is naturalized from North Carolina south along the coast to Florida, and then across all of the Gulf states to Texas, and now there's some in California. So it's slowly moving. It was brought in, believe it or not, by Ben Franklin and the people that he was working with because it has a value as an oil crop. They were making candles and things like that with it. Today it's still used. The seeds are processed and it's still used to some degree in paint and varnishes because when the wax dries, it hardens, so it gives not only a luster but protection to the wood you put it on, and the seed, the other oil that the seed produces is used in biofuels. So it came here for a good reason, people thought.
I've never had Chinese tallow honey or seen it. Is it light or is it dark?
It's a light amber in color.
Mm-hmm.
So it's darker than the clover's honeys, but it's lighter than it's buckwheat or some of the dark honeys, and it has a pretty mild taste. It's a really good a good flavor, and people across the entire southern United States, that's what they think of when they think of local honey.
All right.
It said it has kind of a Cajun flavor to it, just a little bit.
Yes.
So it blooms in early April, and that's when you're making honey and raising queens and packages.
Well, I make queens and packages in March and April, but in my area, the tallow doesn't bloom until May. And so in Texas, it blooms earlier, and as it moves eastward across the south, the dates progress. So it blooms in early to mid-May, or probably late April, early May in Texas and Louisiana. Then by the time it gets to South Mississippi, it's late May into the 1st of June, and then I think it's a little bit later over into Florida. It's a progressional floral source. So in my area, you have spring tie, and then you have yopons, and then you have the gallberries, and then you have the tallow. And then in between there's some privet hedge and some other plants, but those are the principal plants, and they bloom in succession. So about the time the gallberry is over with, the tallow is just starting to bloom. So if tallow goes away, there's nothing that's going to replace it. All of the native and the other naturalized plants that are in the area, they're through making honey by then. So there goes, 60 to 70% of my honey crop.
Ooh, man. Well, it's like I said, APHIS has put a comment period on. You go to USDA-APHIS.gov and you can find where to make a comment on this. American honey producers have produced actually an information sheet on this that you can look at and get information on to make comments on. Is that correct?
Yes. If you go to our website, which is www.ahpanet.com, ahpanet.com, there's a page on there to give you sample letters to talk about how it's affecting you. And there's a link there to click that take you to the comment section. I mean, it's very important to say, hey, I don't like this, and this is why. But the things that are going to sway APHIS's mind are things like, this is important to my business. This will cost me my job. This will cost the jobs of my 2 or 20 employees. For instance, there's a beekeeper in Texas who produces $15 million worth of honey every year. And he bottles a good portion of that and sells it in local stores. So if the tallow tree is reduced so that he can't make but half of his crop, well, some of his employees are going to lose a job. His taxes he's not going to pay as many state and federal taxes. He's not going to be able to supply as much honey to the grocery stores for their customers who want to buy local honey. The ramifications are far outweigh just what money it helps put in my pocket. It's going to affect one of my customers. It's going to affect squash production in Massachusetts. Did you know that, Kim?
Really?
Yes.
How so?
Well, myself and 2 other Russian queen producers in this area, we sell queens and nukes to beekeepers in Massachusetts. One guy in particular, and he pollinates squash. If he doesn't have the access to early queens and nukes, he can't maintain his hive population. So he can't pollinate that $125,000 worth of pollination fees that he collects to pollinate squash. So if the squash producer is paying over $100,000 for an input into his crop, he's making 5 times that, 10 times that. I don't know how squash production exactly works, but I know that that Forbes magazine said that the U.S. bee industry was a $4 billion industry. There's been other accounts. Cornell University said that the value of managed pollination is a $29 billion industry. So if an industry that generates $4 billion is responsible for the production of $29 billion worth of agriculture, that's a huge impact that doing away with tallow, or even if you reduce it significantly, is going to have on the U.S. food supply. Not to mention all of the jobs that are associated with beekeepers, honey production, bottled plants, glass jar manufacturers, farmers markets. That's where the real impact is what's the true impact of doing away with tallow. It might help alleviate a problem on some piece of land, but it's only a problem because the landowner didn't take care of a nuisance tree when he had a chance. And now he's let it go long enough that it's got to the point that he's got to hire a bulldozer or to come in and bulldoze the property, in which he completely disturbs the landscape. And in those cases, tallow can be a problem in certain areas. And I've gotten way off on a soapbox here. So
You've laid out many reasons why the tallow is important. What is the problem? Why is APHIS wanting to get rid of it? Is it clogging waterways? Is it damaging roads and property? What's the point on that side?
So tallow is an invasive plant because it came from someplace else, China, and it's here, and it grows rapidly. And in certain places and in certain conditions, it will completely replace all of the other vegetation, all the other trees in an area. So it can clog waterways. It does grow up in your fence rows and can cause a problem. If you have it in your cow pasture and you don't do anything with it until the sapling gets knee high or waist high, and then you mow it with a bush hog, you're going to end up with 10 or 15 plants instead of one. But if you go out there when they're little and you spray them with a herbicide, or if you manually pull them out of the ground, then all your tallow's gone. It reproduces through the root system.
Yeah.
It reproduces by seeds, but it also reproduces through the root system. And I understand that in certain places it can be a real problem. Now, APHIS, in their own environmental assessment, they didn't do an economic assessment. We want them to do that, but in their environmental assessment, they talk about its importance to human health. And the two issues with human health that they talk about are the tree sap getting on your skin can be burned. It can be somewhat toxic, I guess. I don't know. I've never had an issue with it. And people might be allergic to the pollen. Well, I haven't seen them try to eradicate ragweed. And we know everybody in the country is allergic to ragweed, right? So I don't see those as realistic issues. There's been reports that the seeds are toxic to cattle, but I couldn't find any real evidence of that. I haven't talked to any local cattle farmers that have a problem with it. In their environmental assessment, they say that it's going to cost between $200 and $400 million for the forest industry to deal with tallow over the next 20 years. I have neighbors who are in the forestry business in South Mississippi where tallow is prevalent, and they don't really see tallow as an issue. It's kind of a nuisance, but they don't view it that they're losing any forest ground. They don't lose any products to trees. The places where tallow grows and you plant a pine tree there, the pine tree is going to grow really slow. It's not like it's a house. It's marginal ground. So it's not high value ground that the tallow trees are invading and taking over.
As I understand it, where tallow gets established is what used to be an open field, and is no longer managed, and it has no competition. I got a sentence here from the APHIS report that kind of sums all of this up, what you were saying, Steve. It says tallow invasions alter species composition, community structure, and ecosystem processes in many native habitats. And that's basically what you were explaining. And the forestry part of it is, the only thing about tallow is you almost can't use the wood at all because it's so crooked. The trees and the branches are so crooked, so it doesn't make a good wood product. And I'll go back to, I wanted to sum this up. I was going to say that what's the ripple effect Jeff was asking about. It's not a ripple effect, as you were explaining it with pollination in lots of places other than Massachusetts. It's a tsunami effect, I think, that's going to happen if this goes away. And you are correct. The APHIS needs to do an economic survey of what going to happen when this goes away, not only an ecological survey. I agree. So what you're asking people to do is to read the stuff that APHIS has put on their webpage about this. Maybe look up a couple of other places, because most of the people listening to this aren't living in your part of the world. They're the people that are going to be on the pollination of squash in Massachusetts end of what's happening there. That's what's going to affect them, right? So everybody needs to be a part of this, not just the people that are living in those 11 states down there.
Yeah, I've heard a few beekeepers up in the Massachusetts, New York area talk about, I think it's purple loosestrife. Is that right?
Yeah.
We worked on trying to get that stopped a couple of years ago. Obviously, we weren't successful. By the time we found out about it as a honey producing association, the wheels were already in motion. One of the things that they say is that the tallow is going to go away slowly and the native plants will replace it. Well, if that was true, there would have been native plants here and there would have been a bee industry in existence 50 years ago that somewhat resembled what it does now. And that's not the case. So the people in the blueberry producers in Maine, the almond growers in California, the apple growers in New York, who rely on bees that ultimately come from the South, they definitely have a lot at stake. And yes, we want them to go to the APHIS website, to the comments website, and tell their story. How much do they rely on bees? And they probably don't really think about it at this point, but they need to think about what's going to happen if I can only get half as many bees as I am right now. What's going to happen if I can't get any bees? Or what's going to happen if the price of bees doubles? How's that going to affect my production, my profit margin in apple production or squash or blueberries or any of the other 90 crops that the U.S. relies on for managed bee pollination?
So beekeepers that live in that affected area should be contacting the people that they're selling queens to, selling packages to, going up north and pollinating, and say, hey, get on the stick here. You want me coming back next year? Write a letter.
Exactly. That's exactly what they need to do.
So, Kim, you were saying as we were getting ready to start that you'd check to see how many responses have been posted on the APHIS site?
Yeah, we're recording this on what's the date today? The 18th? The 18th of February, and we've got not a lot of days left maybe, but as of the 17th, there were 607 comments that APHIS had recorded already. So I'm guessing that 4 times that many would elicit some kind of response from APHIS, and that's what we're trying to get here. Does AHPA, the American Honey Producers, have any influence in persuading APHIS to leave this comment period open longer?
We have asked that it be extended by 60 days. They've told us that they think it will, but I haven't heard anything official from that. So we're hoping that it'll get extended at least 60 days, but we don't know for sure yet.
Well, I guess if you're listening to this and you've got a dog in this fight, don't bet on it. Get out there in a hurry.
Steve, appreciate you coming back on the podcast to talk about the Chinese tallow issue, and wish you luck in this. It's a very important discussion.
Well, thanks, Jeff and Kim. I really appreciate you inviting me to be on the podcast again. And by the way, the last time I was on the show, a couple of weeks later, I had a guy from Germany email me and say he had listened to me on the podcast and was wanting to know if I could send him some queens to Germany.
Well, good.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, good luck with that, though. You're right. Well, Steve, yeah, like Jeff said, thanks for being here. We'll try and rattle some trees and get people to move on this one. We hope for an extra 30 days or 60 days.
We appreciate y'all doing this. Thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you. Hey, Kim, I was happy to have Stephen back. He was fun to have him talking about Russians earlier last year, and now talking about this important issue. I learned something. That was good discussion.
That's good. Yeah, I've always known tallow was important, and I did a little bit of digging. I found out how important, and he really laid it out well when he did that. That if you want bees in March or in April in Massachusetts to pollinate whatever, you better support not getting rid of this plant. So I'm just here to encourage you. We don't know exactly how long this window is going to be. It may end at midnight tonight. And if drop what you're doing, go to the USDA-APHIS webpage and find where you can make a comment, because otherwise you're going to be paying more for queens this year. You're going to be paying more for squash and blueberries and cranberries and everything else.
Yeah, and just to clarify, it's the original close date on comments was February 22nd, and they're supposed to extend it to another 60 days, so it'd be like April 22nd. So hopefully, by the time this podcast release, the extension is in place, and anybody who wants to leave a comment can leave a comment. Otherwise, it will close on the 22nd.
And we'll have the closing date on our webpage as soon as we learn if they pushed it back.
That's right. We'll have the link to the APHIS website and also the American Honey Producers as well.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing is Stephen was able to very succinctly say what the benefits of the Chinese tallow tree are in terms of the honey production and the people who depend on it. And APHIS is introducing or is going to has introduced a plan to eliminate the tree, and I'm thinking, wow, here's something that is, there's some benefit to, and I'm looking around here in my backyard and the fields around here, and it's full of this stupid Scotch broom that has no economical benefit to anybody. It just clutters up any open patch of ground, and then it spreads like bindweed, and like we experienced in Colorado, and people just put up with it, and no one's wanting to exterminate that. I don't understand it.
I don't know that plant. Is it introduced?
Yeah, it's from Scotland.
Oh, well.
I was in Scotland a couple of years ago, and everyone, and it was in bloom there, and everyone's saying, "Isn't that so beautiful?" And I'm sitting there saying, "No." I'm looking at that, and I'm thinking, I just want to burn it. Where's my backpack full of crossbow? I'm going to go spray it.
There you go. Steve mentioned purple loosestrife, which we do have around here, and when I was in Connecticut, a lot of it. New York State has a lot of it, and it bloomed at just exactly the right time between the early spring flow and the later summer flow, so it was perfect. But APHIS introduced something, and it's going away.
Really?
Yep. It's
wow.
I had it here, right where I am in Ohio. I had it there's a creek on the property right next to mine, and it used to be solid loosestrife, and none anymore. It's all gone.
I remember seeing a lot of that. So they're exterminating that as well, eliminating it.
Yep.
Did not know that.
I think they brought in. I think it was a beetle that they brought in, and from where it came from, it's an invasive, and where it came from, they brought in a beetle that eats it there. So they brought the beetle over here, and that's what they want to do with tallow. Is there's a beetle and a moth that the moth eats the leaves, and the beetle eats or punctures the branches, I understand, of the tallow tree and does it in.
That about wraps it up for this episode. Before we go, I want to encourage our listeners to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download and stream the show. Your vote helps other beekeepers find us quicker. Even better, write a review and let other beekeepers looking for a podcast know what you like. You can get there directly on our website from clicking on reviews along the top of any webpage. As always, we thank Bee Culture, the magazine for American beekeeping, for their continued support of Beekeeping Today podcast. We want to thank our regular episode sponsor, Global Patties. Check them out at www.globalpatties.com. We also want to thank Strong Microbials for their support of the podcast. Check out their probiotic line at www.strongmicrobials.com. And finally, and most importantly, we want to thank you, the Beekeeping Today podcast listener, for joining us on the show. Feel free to send us questions and comments at questions@beekeepingtodaypodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. Anything else in closing, Kim?
Go make a comment on the Chinese tallow eradication.
Thanks a lot.